Hi everyone, welcome to this Facebook Live session. It's mine Hazel's first experience of Facebook Live, I think on either side of the camera, so bear with us. This is my colleague Hazel Sanders. Hazel is a Chartered Legal Executive in the team here at Stephens Scown, and I'm Ellie Hibbert, a partner in the team, and I head up our HR Express service. Now, we've had a great few weeks here at Stephens Scown. We were really pleased at the end of February to learn we had our 5th successive year in the Sunday Times 100 Best Companies to Work For, and it's something we're really proud of as a business. It got me and Hazel to thinking about our topic for today, what we wanted to talk about, and we're going to focus on looking after your people, trends we see in this area for 2019.
Yeah, it really is something that we place a lot of importance on here at Stephens Scown, is looking after our people. Do you think there's things that we've done here that businesses listening might be able to do?
Absolutely. I mean, we know very well from the businesses we work with, they're largely owner-managed, small SMEs. We know they're under a lot of challenges, financial pressures and so on. So we're not going to recommend a whole pile of expensive long-term projects. We started very simply, it was that staff survey, and if we're honest, probably the results weren't what we wanted.
Yeah.
But it did say to us there was a problem. We knew we had to address it, and we have come full circle from there. So we've introduced some very small things, but ways of recognising our employees. So we have our Scony stories. Now, I heard yesterday for International Happiness Day that apparently more employees say feeling appreciated is important to them than say their salary. Now, Scony stories are designed to praise those who've gone the extra mile for a client. They're a very public way of doing it. We get chocolate and fruit on our desks.
Always appreciated.
Came into that a couple of weeks ago, it was great. Now, they do have a serious message behind them. You know, they were GDPR compliant and corporate social responsibility.
Yeah.
But they didn't cost the firm very much. But we all started the day with a smile. I think most importantly, what we've done is given our employees a voice.
Yeah.
We've set up a whole set of focus groups. They all meet, they report back to the board. It means that people really feel they're part of the organisation.
Yeah.
And I think businesses need to come back to this idea that it's not all about the money.
Yeah.
It's actually making sure people feel valued for what they do, what they bring to the organisation.
Definitely.
And we've now taken that even further through to our schoonership scheme. We're one of the very few employee-owned law firms out there, and we all have a real stake in the business. So traditionally when businesses have looked at succession planning, it's been about MBOs or maybe a sale in the open market. From my perspective, I think employee ownership is going to really grow in popularity in coming years. And we absolutely hope to be able to work with businesses on it, both from our own legal expertise, but our own personal experiences as well. My colleague Christian Wilson down in Truro, he's done his own Facebook Live on this. He's also written an article about it as well. So it's something we're really alive to at the minute.
Okay, that's really, really interesting. Is there anything else that people need to be thinking about when it comes to looking after their people?
Yeah, I think getting those foundations in place, getting really good people practices set up. We know from the businesses we work with that those who are engaged in this area, who take the time to invest in having sound, fair HR practices, will face far fewer employee issues. They're much more less likely to get the employment tribunal claim coming through. And there's a real benefit to investing in it.
Yes, definitely.
It's something that through HR Express we all work very closely with clients on, and Mark Roby, our colleague in Truro, has just done a really great practical article which picked up some issues that might arise, problems that could have been avoided if businesses had had those practices in place.
Yeah, definitely. So HR Express, how can people find out more about that?
So I think if you look through the comments to today's session, there's a link in there to our HR Express webpage, there's a link to our brochure, and we would absolutely, of course, be delighted to talk to anyone who might be interested in hearing more about it.
Definitely. So if you are just joining us, I'm Hazel Sanders, I'm a Chartered Legal Executive here at Stephens Scown, and this is my colleague Ellie Hibbert, who is a partner and head of HR Express. Today we are looking at looking after your people and trends in 2019.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we just talked about HR Express, one of the things we see increasingly through that is flexible working requests. It's been a real growth area in our queries. And of course, 5 years ago, that right was much more limited. It was only parents and certain carers who could make the request.
Yeah.
We're now in a world where any worker who's got 26 weeks service can make that request to work flexibly.
Yes.
So do you have a feel from the clients we've been working with, the queries we've dealt with, what the mood is around flexible working currently?
Yeah, I think it's still largely resistant. I think there is quite a bit of negative energy around flexible working requests still, especially when it's not linked to childcare responsibilities. Yeah. Like you just touched upon, it's been expanded, everyone has the right, but employers do tend to, I think, sometimes still focus on it, well, if there's not a child involved, why? And I think that resistance does largely stem out of three main kind of areas. One is the business feeling that there's a lack of commitment from an employee who doesn't want to be there 5 days a week, 9 till 5. Why don't they want to be here? One is, very legitimate concerns about as well regarding how it's going to impact on your customer services. That's really important. And another one that I see come up time and time again is where people have had previous experiences that have gone bad, and that is going to sour the mood towards a flexible working request quite significantly when they come up again in the future. But I do feel that there are positive potential opportunities to be had from flexible working, but I do feel at this point in time we're still in kind of a negative mindset on it.
Okay, I mean, it'd be great if we could see businesses being more open to it. So how could we highlight those possible potential opportunities for people?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two broad categories that it comes down to, and then an overarching benefit that people can have. So the two kind of broad categories is we are in the sandwich generation. People have conflicting commitments coming from all angles at them. It's just crazy living in today's world sometimes. So if you're looking after an elderly parent and looking after children, having one day off a week can help you deal with those commitments. And then when you are at work, you're going to be focused on work. You're probably going to be enjoying the distraction of being at work as well. So it just gets that focus to your employees. The other one is that we've all heard the saying, 2 minds better than one. You've got 2 people in a job share, you've got more solutions, more ideas coming to the table, and they're coming from different perspectives as well, which is really helpful when businesses are trying to move forward and grow.
So if a business is nervous then about granting a request, how do they balance that nervousness against their workers' rights to make the request?
So it all comes down to balance, but at the focus of it is business needs, so that's always going to what it's going to come back round to. There are only 8 grounds on which you can refuse a flexible working request, and they all have business needs entirely within them. So when you receive a request, it's really important to remember that it's the right to make that request, not the right to have it granted. So please don't feel on the back foot from the get-go. You're not under pressure, but what you do need to do is approach it with an open mind, investigate it, and we'd really recommend working collaboratively with your employee on it. The burden is not all on you to make it work. They should be coming to you. They should have considered how it might impact on the team. They should have come up with some solutions that they can put forward to you. So you've got all of that arsenal as well to work with the employee. Once you have investigated it, you have a meeting with them, you can discuss through all the options, and in total you've got about 3 months to come back to them. That can be extended sometimes, and you can have trial periods, which are great. Trial periods are really useful because they're a great mechanism for which you can test the waters, really, see whether or not things are going to work before you make a firm commitment. So no harm in trying them.
Yeah, I can see trial periods being a really useful way of giving something a go if you're nervous about it, particularly. What else practically should employers bear in mind when they're looking at these requests and how they might actually work in practice?
Yeah, so it is very much looking at it from a practical level, as you said there. Team bonding is really important within a business, and that can be impacted upon if people can't get together all the time, both from business, both from meetings points of view, but also from social activities. So if you can retain a core day when everybody's in, that's going to be really, really helpful. Ability to oversee work, that's something else that we see often as being a practical issue. Your supervisors being in on days when the people they're mentoring aren't in, and vice versa. IT can be used quite a bit to help you with that these days, though, in terms of how you can get that supervisory oversight. Timings of meetings, and I can't stress this enough, the biggest concern that we have employees come to us with is that they are being ignored for their part-time status or feeling completely cut out. And one of the biggest, easiest mistakes to make as well is when you put a meeting in someone's diary and they're not actually at work because they don't start work till 10 and you put them in at 9 o'clock in the morning. And that leaves quite a sour note with an employee and causes quite a bit of disquiet. So just thinking about those things, mistakes happen, but just kind of making sure you have a mind to them. Yeah. And then I think friction between job shares is probably the last situation that causes quite a bit of negative reaction on a practical front, where you've got two people who just aren't getting on, they didn't gel well together. So I think from that front, it is a matter of managing that situation in terms of potentially performance, potentially disciplinary, depending on what those behaviours that those employees are exhibiting. It shouldn't be something whereby you go, oh, it's flexible working, I can't do anything. You can manage that situation just as you would any other employee who's not performing or behaving properly.
Great.
So that was a lot on flexible working from kind of an employee sense in people part-time working, full-time working as employees. What's been in the news a lot recently, Ellie, is to do with the gig economy and absolutely. how that's developing and how it's working. And I know that there was a good work plan come out. So can you tell me a bit more about that and what we should be looking forward to in 2019?
Yeah, the good work plan is something that we are absolutely mapping as something for the next 1 to 2 years, perhaps a little bit longer. It is true we are a little unsighted on some of its recommendations at the minute. Some don't have a timeline attached to them. Some have already come into force. Some are coming in the next year, but it's certainly something to be keeping an eye on. Now, if you are just joining us, welcome to our Facebook Live session. We're looking after your people and emerging trends in that area for 2019. My name's Ellie Hibbard. I'm a partner in the employment team heading up our HR Express service, and I work very closely with my colleague Hazel Sanders, who's a Chartered Legal Executive. We were just going to look at the Good Work Plan, which came off the back of the Taylor Review into Modern Working Practices, which, as you said, was really triggered by the gig economy, people working on 0 hours contracts, really changing how we work in the modern workplace. Yeah. It does, though, tie very closely into this idea of employee engagement and being fair, having a good place to work. Yeah. And of course, underpinning all of that is actually a boost to business productivity, because that's what we want to achieve at the end. It splits into 3 areas: fair and decent work, clarity for both employers and workers, and fair enforcement. So if we just pick up the first of those, fair and decent work, this is one of those areas we are unfortunately most unsighted. There's a lot of opaqueness about when things might come into effect, but there are 2 key areas I wanted to highlight. One is going to be a right for workers to request a more predictable and stable contract once they've got 26 weeks service. Now, we don't know what that's going to look like. It is, as I say, a right to request. Maybe it will be like the flexible working regime, with set reasons on which it can be rejected. We don't know, but it's certainly out there as a possibility. There's also an idea that we're going to increase the permitted service gap between contracts. So currently, continuity of employment will be broken after 1 week. That 1 week will increase to 4. So actually that will make it more open to workers to acquire rights that have a minimum service requirement attached to them. What we don't have any suggestion of in the plan yet is a higher hourly rate for workers with non-guaranteed hours. This had been mooted as a possibility to counter some of that uncertainty, to have a bit of a quid pro quo situation on it. It's not been taken up. Government are apparently still looking at it, but it's not covered in the plan.
So that's something the government's still looking into. We have had a raft of case law recently, though, in terms of employment status. Is that addressed at all in the Good Work Plan?
It would be unfair to say it doesn't deal with employment status, but sadly what it doesn't give us is a magic test and clarity about how we determine employment status. And this is one of those really frustrating areas, I think, for businesses and advisors at the minute. We've got different categories of employee, worker, self-employed. I'll come back to it in a moment, but as yet, no, it's not in the Good Work Plan in terms of changing those tests. We have got some suggestions though. So from April 2020, we're going to have a right to written terms for all workers. So rather than it just being the current Section 1 statement for employees, that will be extended to all workers, and there will also be more content in the Section 1 statement as well. We're also going to see a change in the reference period for holiday pay. We've grappled with this a lot in the last 1 or 2 years, probably longer. Currently, if you're working out holiday pay for a worker with variable hours, it will be calculated over probably the previous 12 weeks pay levels. That 12 weeks is going to be extended to 52. The idea being that that will then erode any fluctuations that there might be through the year and hopefully be fairer.
Yeah.
And I think that's what government are trying to get to. It's this fairness for employees, and they are going to bring in some initiatives to raise awareness around holiday pay and enforcement. But again, we still don't have the clarity on what that's actually going to look like.
So, sounds like a lot of things are still up in the air, obviously. Are we aware of any enforcement, any teeth to these new rules that might be coming in as and when they do?
Yeah, now this is tricky because I know, there'll be lots of businesses out there who will think, well, come on, these employees already have so many rights. Why are we giving them any more? Why do they need to be able to enforce them better? But I think, to be fair, there are employees out there who don't know what their rights are or don't know how to pursue them if they are infringed. And it's right that they should be protected as well. So what the Good Work Plan recommends is a simplification of the employment tribunal system, provide greater clarity to users through the process. Now, yes, that benefits claimants, but I think we would both say from our own experience it will benefit businesses too. It's very difficult when you've got a non-represented claimant on the other side. It takes longer, it costs more, it's just more difficult. So I think that will have benefits both ways. What they're also going to try and encourage tribunals to do is use the powers available to them. They do have wider powers than might currently be used, and they're going to encourage that, for example, around aggravated damages for contractual breaches and so on. And we've also seen, just before Christmas, an introduction of a naming and shaming scheme. So very similar to the national minimum wage one, where employers will now be named and shamed if they fail to pay a tribunal award. So obviously very important to be aware of that as well.
Very important. So if there are organisations out there that are concerned about employment status, what practical advice can we give at the moment while things are still up in the air?
Yeah, this is something that is out in the media a huge amount at the minute. We've obviously had the line of case law around Buber Delivery. We've recently put out an article around that, which might be useful for businesses to read as a starting point. But if we think about the practicalities, I think there are 3 things I'd say immediately. One is for businesses really to be honest about what they've got. Do they genuinely think the people in their business are self-employed? Or if they took a step back and looked into the business, would these people look the same as their employees? Because if they do, and they're fully integrated into the business, there is a real risk that they will have acquired employment rights, which is fine whilst everything is okay, but clearly it becomes a problem if something goes wrong in the future. It's then a case of looking at what contracts you've got in place for those individuals. Do they really reflect that reality? A tribunal or a court will absolutely look at the contracts you've got in place, but it's only one piece of the picture. And they will go behind it to make sure that that really is what's going on in practice. And lastly then, take advice. It's an important area, not just from a legal perspective, but for HMRC as well. It's a real focus area for them, and if people have got any concerns, it's important they get advice so they know where their exposure is. There are a lot of tests that apply in this area, things around personal service, control, mutuality of obligation. So it's a real balancing exercise, but people do need to know what's involved. As I say, it's frustrating and disappointing that we don't have the clarity everyone's calling for. I suspect perhaps our politicians have been rather too busy squabbling about Brexit to be worrying about employment status, but that doesn't really help us and the businesses out there.
Yes, I imagine so, but we're still uncertain and up in the air about Brexit as well.
We are, so even more so.
Moving on from there, we just wanted to update quickly also on how Brexit might affect people who work within your organisation if they are EU or EEA nationals. What we're recommending people do is if they have a quick chat with those individuals in the business who might be feeling a bit insecure, make sure you have an understanding of how they're feeling, see whether or not they have started putting arrangements in place. The upshot of that is they're going to feel supported, but equally as a business you're going to have a better sight as to what you might come across in the future. you know, when all your employees suddenly leaving, you know, it may be that everything's in order, but equally there's quite a large possibility they need to make application to Home Office for leave to remain. On the point of the application, there is a new system now in place for EU and EEA nationals that's been launched, so they can apply for pre-settled or settled status depending on their circumstances. That's going to go fully live on the 30th of March 2019. You can apply already, but you have to pay the fee and then get a refund, whereas from the 30th of March it'll be free. Just a fabulous government U-turn on the fees for it, basically. So if you have any concerns, or if your employees have any concerns, we really do recommend that they get in touch and seek immigration advice. We have an excellent immigration team here. We've got a wealth of experience advising on individual status, but also on business immigration, so sponsor licenses, to see whether or not, you know, we can support your business, because you might actually need people from the countries.
Yeah, and the immigration team, of course, have just done some great work with one of our clients, haven't they?
They have.
They went in-house, worked very closely with the HR management teams, spoke with the individual employees as well. So certainly worth looking out for businesses out there.
Definitely.
Great. Now I'm just going to check if we've had any questions come in whilst we've been talking. I think there's one around flexible working.
Oh yes. That's a big one. So someone has written in, I allowed 2 employees to do a job share in the past, but they did not work well together. Given this, I'm reluctant to agree to any more requests in the future. Is this experience good enough reason to say no? I think Ellie will agree with me that that's quite a common experience and common feedback that we do get from employees, because that kind of situation where it goes wrong can really sour somebody's approach to the kind of requests. So my advice would be, stand back and work out whether or not it's linked to the role. Is it because a job share didn't work with the role, or is it because the 2 people who were job sharing had personality incompatibility? Was it their behaviour and their personalities that made the situation not work? If it's the role, then by all means that can be used as information, evidence that informs future decisions. You can use that kind of information. But if it's people's personalities or their behaviours that's causing the problem, then really what you should be doing is managing that situation in the way you would any other. You're not restricted from managing people because they're flexible workers or they're part-time. Obviously you can't treat them less favourably, but you can manage that, and if there's performance or disciplinary issues there, then that's definitely something you can get to grips with and deal.
Great, thank you. I think we might just have time for one more. So if we want to start an employee focus group, what should we think about? It's a good question, and I think for particularly small and growing businesses out there, it can be a really great way of getting people really on board, really engaged with the business. And I think, what would I think about? I think you've got to make sure you've got a good spread of workers in the group. So our focus groups here very much draw on all sectors of the firm, all levels of seniority, and so on. Obviously making sure we don't forget about our flexible workers.
Yes,
we want to make sure they've got a chance to be involved as well. And I think from the outset, make sure you know what you want them to be looking at.
Yes.
It's great that your employees get together socially. That's really to be encouraged, but this is something more focused. They need to know what they're reporting back on, and make sure they've got the channels to feed that back through to senior management, because I think probably if you set up a focus group and then did nothing with its outcomes, that's probably worse than never having had a focus group at all.
I would agree.
So that's, I would absolutely encourage businesses to look at them. They're a really good idea.
Brilliant.
So I think that's, I think there might just be one more question coming through. Just bear with us one moment. Just trying to get it through from our video team. Thank you.
Okay, so the question that's coming is shared parental leave an option for male employees when the child's mother is employed?
Yes.
It says yes
is the short answer to that question. It's something that came in 2 years ago, shared parental leave, I think. And yes, it's a right for male and female employees to share leave between them. So if you've got an employee who is Oh, I'm sorry. The question
Yeah,
was actually whether the child's mother is unemployed. I'm so sorry. That's we'll blame the marketing team for that one.
Blame the video crew.
There are eligibility requirements for shared parental leave. The mother does have to be. She does have to be employed, I think. We might need to double check this one for you.
Yeah, that is an interesting question.
The principle of shared parental leave is absolutely to give parents the right to share that leave between them. So you've got a 52-week period of leave that you can share.
Yeah.
There is a compulsory amount on the beginning that the mother has to have.
Yeah.
But then there is an ability for the father to share that between them and take the balance of what leave remains.
Yeah.
As to whether the mother has to be employed, I've only ever had to deal with it where she has been, I confess. It's not something that's come up in a scenario where she hasn't been.
Yeah. Yeah, but we will look into that and come back to you.
Absolutely. Lastly then, we're just going to add into the comments a invite to our employment law update. We're running these the week after next on the 2nd of April in Truro, 4th of April here in Exeter, and we've got a great set of topics. We're covering absence management, tricky dismissals and heat of the moment resignations. We're going to do a bit of horizon scanning, case law update, and we've also got an external speaker coming in from Skylight Associates to do some work with us on coaching and mentoring. So if you do want to come along, let us know. We'd be delighted. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time today. We do hope it's been useful. If you've heard anything you'd like to know more about, do get in touch.